Guild Wars, Sea of Sorrows. Chapter 27. You've got to stop acting like this, Kobaya. Gallivanting about after saboteurs half your age, risking your life in scraps with bandits out at the dock. You're not as young as you used to be. Kobaya grimaced. A char's scolding me about being too eager to rush into combat. What's the world coming to? Look, it's been 3 weeks since that fight. I'm fine. Sikox grumped, folding his arms over the lighthouse rail and enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun. You know I appreciate a good fight as much as anyone, but you've always been the one who leapt before you looked. In the Iron Legion, we don't leap until we've built 3 sets of siege engines and a tank to go in ahead of us. If Issei were here, you know she'd say, "Yeah, well, Issei's not here." Kobaya shot him a dirty look. So can we stop bringing her up already? Below them, the streets of the city were splayed out like a thick rug, with citizens traveling here and there, huddled in their cloaks as though afraid that simply being in the open would put them in danger. Although Adair's ships were still far from the city docks, the Creodan prince's bullying presence could be felt throughout Lion's Arch. Sikox sighed. A pity that she's the only one who can talk sense into you when you get like this. Understandingly, the Char changed the subject. So, what's Adair up to now? The old friend stood on the balcony of the tall lighthouse at Lion's Gate, looking out over the bay and into the Sea of Sorrows. From here, they could see the Creodan fleet surrounding the mouth of the harbor. Gold and green flags waving atop both high-masted ships of the line and swift scout vessels. All of the ships bristled with armaments. Cannons glistened on the decks and through portholes in rows of 10, 20, and even 30, metal gleaming amid the oak hulls of massive ships. Kobaya raised his sextant again, peering through the scope toward Prince Eder's massive armada. Not much. They ran off 2 trade vessels early this morning that were trying to sneak through the barricade. Since then, it's been quiet. 2 ships in particular drew Kobaya's eye. One was the sleek Nomad 2. The other, sailing beside her, was the burliest galleon in the group, probably the largest ship in the world, and easily the fattest and slowest glutton of a boat Kobe had ever seen. He could read her name in gold letters on the ship's stern, Balthazar's Trident, from the crown that ornamented her prow and the long pennants of green silk flowing from all 3 of her masts. Kobaya guessed the chubby warthog bore a member of the royal family of Creata. Adair. The ships won't take action until he's ready. Adair's not the kind to let someone else claim his glory. Kobaya snapped the sextant back into his hand, closing the delicate instrument before pushing it into his pocket. The activity stretched the skin across his ribs, and he flinched instinctively. The wound on his side had been slow to heal, leaving a long mark across his ribs, where the brigand's knife had sliced him open. He still bandaged the area, applying a healer's salve to numb the ongoing pain. Sikox was right when he'd been a young man. Such things barely slowed Kobaya down. Lately, things were different. It felt like everything in the world had sped up while he was standing still. The blockade had been in place nearly a month, and the city was suffering. Creodan Seraph gathered on the roads to the north, threatening land routes, though they'd been unable to fully block the roads as yet. Incoming trade had stagnated. Warehouses along the docks tightened their guard in fear of rioting over food supplies. The Lion Guard were working long shifts, going house to house where necessary to keep the peace. The fire had destroyed more than 80% of the ships at harbor that night, along with all of their wares and stores. The fire had also cut off the city's hope for a rebuttal against the blockade. The ships that survived were a motley assortment of frigates and carracks, none outfitted for war. If the Cretans hadn't torched the docks, Lion's Arch might have been able to punch through the blockade. Now there was little hope of defeating the Creodan armada, and the citizens of Lion's Arch were rapidly losing morale. With little choice and plenty of reason to fear, every wagon and cart in the city had been commandeered. They'd loaded each wagon with women and children, and then, under a flag of truce, the caravan was sent along the northern road toward the Shiver Peaks. With luck, they'd reach the mountain passes before the first icy rains of the season made the road too treacherous to travel. The Seraph agreed to give them an escort. If they made it that far, the caravan could reach the Nornway camp known as Holbrack before winter. From there, the refugees could travel via active Asura Gate to Divinity's Reach, the Black Citadel, or Rada Sum, anywhere safer than here. Kobaya looked out at the sea again, the bright light of the setting sun glinting like a river of silver. Without the sextant's clear view, the armada gathered on the horizon looked like ravens clustered on a tree branch, waiting for the city to die so they could pick its bones clean. Xmong, Sickox, let's take the lay of the land. The old Char nodded, matching his stiff, slightly limping stride to the Commodore's. Down below the lighthouse, they entered the city streets. While the city had yet to be physically harmed by the Creadan blockade, other than the docks at the landing, of course it had clearly wounded its spirit. Desperation hung like a gray shroud over Lion's Arch. Forsaking his typical cheery greetings, Kobaya nodded briefly to those he passed, as his mind spun through every possibility. Could they bribe the Creadan captains? Pay Prince Adair a high price to keep the land? Would he even consider ransoming Lion's Ark's freedom like that? Or was he dedicated to the idea of ruling the city? Nodobi had already given good reason not to request the intervention of one of the Char legions. But what about the Norn? Were there enough mercenaries in Holbrake to take on the Seraph? Every option seemed worse than the last. A word, Commodore. Sidubo Nodobi's smooth voice was impossible to mistake. Sighing, Kobaya slowed his pace. He muttered an old saying, "Think too hard on Grenth, and he'll come riding on your coattails." What's that? The Elanian fell into step with them, his forehead creasing with confusion. Kobaya waved the comment away, and Nodobi went on. I hate to interrupt your concentration, but I have bad news. Worse than the harbor fire? Nodobi paused to consider, and Kobaya immediately regretted the question. Perhaps not that bad, Nodobi said at last, but not particularly auspicious. Kobaya pinched the bridge of his nose. What is it? Yam's missing. Missing? Sickox tilted his head and snorted disdainfully. Hiding, more likely. Possible, but I don't think so. One of the merchants in the plaza saw light on the Asura Gate platform, just before dawn. It was active this morning. Nodobi lifted his hands in an elegant gesture. We've checked. It's not working now. Whatever or whoever turned it on managed to turn it off again before the Lion Guard reached the platform. Kobaya blew out a long breath of air. That weaselly little traitor. I guess he did find a way to resurrect the discombobulated fidget casters, or whatever the hell was keeping those things closed. Shaking his head, Kobaya met Nodobi's eyes grimly. Check his shop. There's a chance he's hiding under his desk, but it's likely we won't see him again unless the city's recovered. At the least, you can take a tally of whatever stores he's got left at the mercantile. Aye, Commodore. Nodobi gave him a dignified bow and strode off toward the plaza. Sickox grumbled. This just keeps getting worse. If we don't catch a break soon, we're sunk. Kobaya didn't respond. There was no need to restate the obvious, and the Char's tail was already thrashing like an angry serpent. The two continued their trek through the city, from the empty shopping areas, past the blackened dock, toward the fort on the far side of the gangplank. There, several young men and women of the city were training ferociously with weapons. Although they'd likely be little match for the Seraph, if it came to that, it gave them something constructive to do, and Kobaya approved of their initiative. He could make out Captain Hedda and her husband, Braun, in the middle of the pack, schooling 4 eager young sailors with training swords. Too young, he thought as he watched them. Far too young to be at war. Although he'd been the same age when he boarded the Indomitable, surely he'd never been so fresh-faced and naive. "Commodore," one of the boys waved toward him. Long brown hair, an eager smile, and loping, slightly bowed legs. Kobaya couldn't make him out. Surely it wasn't. "Sethis?" "Who, sir?" the young man asked cheerily as he trotted out of the glare. "It's me, sir." "Benedict. Remember?" The young man smiled and reached to shake his hand. Benedict. Relief washed over Kobaya. Sethis had died more than 30 years ago. How could he have made such a ridiculous mistake? "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "After our little adventure, sir, I figured it was time for me to learn how to use a sword." Benedict reddened, rubbing his forehead with a nervous hand. "If I'd been trained, if I'd known how to fight, sir, that fight might have gone better. I could have protected you." "Benedict? Protected him?" Kobaya chuckled and patted the youth on his shoulder. "You did fine, young man." Still, although the words hadn't been meant badly, they stung a bit. Another reminder of Kobaya's age. "Are you healing up all right?" "Completely, sir. Just a few scars to help me remember the tale." Benedict showed Kobaya his upper biceps, where a few thin white trails marked the otherwise tan and muscular arms. He'd healed rapidly, another perk of being young. That was a blessing, Kobaya thought, considering that the outcome of their fight against the saboteurs could have been far worse. "He's doing very well." Braun followed the youth carrying his massive greatsword in one hand. The Norn didn't appear to have aged a day since Kobaya had first met him aboard the Salma's Grace, though now he and Hedda had children of their own. 3 sons, Geir, Trygve, and Kaiv, all of whom were among the pack of young people learning weapons on the field, but who clearly had the advantage, even against Char and humans, their own age. Braun saw Kobaya's gaze and said proudly, "Warbands fight as a team, so Char learned group tactics from a young age. Humans prefer to negotiate, so they instinctively concentrate on defense. Norn are taught from birth to be heroes." Braun smiled through his lush beard. "So we fight as heroes." He laughed with good-natured pride, rich and hearty. It had been a while since Kobaya had heard the sound, and he smiled in gratitude. Kobaya tousled Benedict's hair. "You're a brave lad. Get back to your training. Apparently you're representing our entire race out there." He winked at Braun. "Pay attention to Hedda's lessons. She's a hell of a fighter, and you'd do well to remember what she teaches you." "Yes, Commodore, I will." Grinning, Benedict hurried back into formation, practicing his slashes and thrusts as Hedda called out each move. "He's none the worse for wear," Braun chuckled, shoving Kobaya with his shoulder. The Norn's blue eyes lost their twinkle as he asked more quietly, "Can you say the same, old friend?" Before Kobaya could answer the question, he noticed 2 burly Char marching across the gangplank bridge toward the training plaza. Sikox, whose eyes were keener, recognized them first, and all 4 ears pricked forward in glee. "Fasher, Assam." With a wave, the engineer bounded forward to clasp their wrists in greeting. "You old blackguards. How did you get here?" The pride was at sea. Braun greeted his old companions with a bellow of goodwill, thumping their backs even as Kobaya gave them a somewhat more restrained greeting, though the cunning old Char's fur had gone from black to darkly tarnished silver with age. Captain Fasir's grin was just as sharp as ever. Sikox and Awesome burst into challenging, friendly roars, each determined to outdo the other in the ferocity of his greeting. At last, Fasir raised a hand to ask his friends for silence. "I bet you're wondering how we managed to sneak the pride through the blockade." Fasher snickered and brushed his claws through the fur on one arm, so pleased with himself that he might as well have been about to spit up a canary. "Indeed. How in the realms of torment and travail did you do that?" Kobaya brought his attention back to the topic of their feat. Isam cracked his knuckles as he answered the question, his face studiously bland. A good pilot gave us some tricks to slip through against the tide. It was touch and go 'cause we didn't want the Cretans to hear our engine, but we managed to push through while they were eating dinner. I guess they thought it'd be impossible for a boat to enter the harbor when the tide was flowing out. He shook his golden mane, his unusually deep voice resonating with maturity and respect. It is impossible. Kobaya slapped his leg in amusement for everyone but the pride. Well done on sneaking past. Engine or no engine, if the Cretans seen you or if you'd hit the shale or high ruins below the waterline, you'd be driftwood by now. And you did it in the dark to boot? Your new pilot must know these waters darn well. Or be darn lucky. Kobaya ran his fingers through his hair, shrugging it back as he admired the sheer difficulty of such a task. Is he char or human? No matter. Whoever he is, I owe him a bottle of Black Citadel whiskey. Bring him around my manor, and I'll— It's not like that, Kobaya. Fasher gave a sober toss of his iron-tipped horns. He measured the Commodore cautiously, and then, as if he'd come to some silent resolution, he added, it was Isai. Isai gave us the information we needed to come through. Beside him, the younger Asum stiffened, looking much like he was tensing for an inevitable, if undesirable, fight. Kobaya's blood went cold. Sycox was the one who spoke first. Did she come with you? Is she? No. Fasher shrugged, his eyes shifting right to left. She contacted us out at sea, beyond the barricade. She knew our old hiding places, guessed where we'd be holed up, and came to talk to us. Without her, we'd still be out there. She told us when the Creodon patrols were moving, where the tides were turning, where to avoid the hidden reefs. And you trusted her? Kobaya retorted. Colby, Braun admonished him in a booming tone. Such rudeness is beneath you. Let them tell Isaiah's tale and judge her actions by them alone. His beard wagged with disapproval as he thumped Kobaya's shoulder again, this time hard enough to leave a bruise. My dainty love, Hedda, told me of your discourtesy to the Lady Aye when the nomad visited our city. There's an old Norn saying, a cleaved head no longer plots. Braun paused meaningfully. The others stared at him in confusion. Tilting his head, the Norn blinked and rethought his words. Nope, no, wait. It's the other one, sorry. He cleared his throat, trying again. Be not the first to speak angry words, or you shall be the first to feast on them. Braun nodded, conviction returning along with his volume. That's the one. Now let us hear what the Char have to say. Fasher's smile was all teeth and no amusement. She asked us to bring you a message, Colby, he said with a touch of his old savoir-faire. A message? The Commodore grumbled. Keep it. I don't care to hear what she has to say. Sycox smacked the back of Kobaya's head, sending his ponytail flapping about his shoulders. Ow! Kobaya swatted back, but Sycox growled warningly. Will you cut that out, Colby? The woman's not one of your infernal gods. She's your wife. Ex-wife. Wife, Sycox said firmly, correcting him. The priests never separated you, and from what I hear, you humans do whatever your priests say, so get over it. I don't care if she's your wife, your ex-wife, or your goldfish. If Ia's risking herself to help Lion's Arch, then you'll damn well hear what the woman has to say. He rubbed at his cheeks, his jowls and muzzle distending in a sad clown face. I don't care what caused the fight. Just fix the problem. Chastised, Kobaya said. I wish it were that easy. Seagulls circled overhead, their shrill cries echoing. Young voices called out in mock battle cries, and Hedda's low alto broke in here and there, as she corrected a grip or straightened a footing. The sun was overly warm for the afternoon, blazing down on Kobaya's head with an uncomfortable heat. Sighing, Kobaya gave in. Go ahead, Fasher. I'm listening. Fasher's stare was strangely piercing, his tawny yellow eyes both judging and consoling in the same moment, as only a cat can manage. He shifted on his padded feet, sinking his claws into the earth between the cobblestones. I say wants to meet with you, Kobaya. She said that she has political blackmail on Prince Adair, and she's willing to hand it over. Did she say what it was? Interested despite himself, Kobaya tried to keep an open mind. Or how it could help us. Or why me? No. Fasher lowered his head. He picked at one paw with the claws of the other, choosing his words carefully. I haven't always gotten along with Isai, Kobaya. You know that. Titan's blood. I'm the one who got you drunk as a scale when she left. A sharp grin. But she was willing to risk a lot to get the pride to harbor, and she managed it despite our personal history. I believe she's sailing true. When Kobaya remained silent, Fasher carried on. The route she gave us is clear both ways. If we go out while the tide's coming in, after dark, the Crichtons will have their backs to us. More than that, Isai told us where the patrols will be tonight, so we can make it by without alerting them. Kobaya took a moment to consider. He struggled to trust Isai, but every time she did something positive, he saw again the image of finding her that day. She'd been meeting with a Creodan agent at one of the havens north of the city carrying a copy of Kobaya's notes from the council meeting the night before. He squeezed his eyes shut against the bright sun, willing the image to fade into spots and flashes. Is that all? She said that she needed your help. Colby, Fasher added offhandedly, shoulders rippling in a shrug. I said I'd tell you. Kobaya tried not to show how the words infected him, charged his spirit with a sudden desire to rush to her aid. No matter how they fought, Isai always had that effect on him. The Char's yellow eyes crept up from where he'd been staring at the stones on the ground, this time judging Kobaya's reaction. Damn it, Fasher. You know me too well. Feeling equal parts amused and manipulated, Kobaya looked around at the others. Braun jabbed the Commodore in the ribs and nodded encouragement. Isam gave Kobaya a bobbing, reassuring smile, his long horns tilting back and forth. Sikox's ears flicked back and then forward again, as his tail kept up a steady rhythm of annoyance. Thump, 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 thump. Fine. Kobaya threw up his hands. I'll meet with her. But not on the Pride. The nomads in the blockade with the others. And even Adair's not dumb enough to miss my ship when he sees it. We'll have to use an unknown ship. Then they might think we're Cryadan. If we're lucky, I can help with the Lux part. Fasher grinned. I still have that old Cryadan flag in the hold from the time we took the Salma's Grace. Remember? If we fly that on our mast and they don't see which side of the blockade we came from to start, we should be able to get close enough to signal the nomad. Just might work. Kobaya felt his confidence building. We'd just need a ship. Sikox brightened. Use the scout ship, the Gabrian's Comet. She's small, low to the water, and her captain's a friend of mine. I bet I can talk him into loaning her to you for the night. Now we're getting somewhere. Kobaya grinned, feeling the tension leave his body for the first time in weeks. Finally, a plan. They were doing something. Something insane, but something proactive, and that made up for 3 weeks of pent-up frustration. Sikox, commandeer the Comet and crew her with the absolute minimum needed to keep her moving. I'll need you to find 5 sailors. I won't risk any more lives than that on this wild goose chase. 4. I'm your first mate, Fasher growled. No argument, Kobe. My mind's made up. I'm the one who trusted Isai and brought you the message. If it turns out she was using me, Fasher's claws snapped in, then out again. I'll be the one who carves repayment out of her hide. Danger, adventure, possible betrayal by the mighty claw of bear. I'll not leave you on such an adventure, Colby, Braun preened. He leaned close and said sotto voce. Besides, the wife will have me teaching swordplay all day and all night if I stay here. Spirits of the wild, protect me from the jaws of yapping pups. Isam nodded. I'm coming too. Have fun? Suddenly, all eyes turned to Sycox. The orange-furred char crossed his arms over his spotted chest and lashed his tail belligerently. What? I'm sure as the mist's not going with you? All this yammerings reminded me that I have some very important work to finish at the docks. Work? Copaya exclaimed. What in the six gods do you have to work on? The piers are burned. The ships are gone. It's like a Grenth-blasted graveyard down there. Sycox sniffed. You say graveyard, I say opportunity. Lion's Arch still has plenty of men and women ready to crew an armada. The char smiled, and his long white fangs gleamed in the sunlight. I just need to find them something to sail.